Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we're going to start by wrapping up our coverage on the Royal Commonwealth tours.
Yes, following the Cambridge and Wessex disasters of the Caribbean, Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles were dispatched to Canada for a little mini tour.
Yeah, so they did things like meeting with Justin Trudeau, as you can imagine, and they visited a Ukrainian church and various other things, but we didn't really follow it, to be honest. There was one main takeaway, though, and that was that Charles had to address the actions of Canadian schools that stole children from Indigenous people between 1874 and 1996. So, this is very recent history for a lot of people. This is not something buried in the past at all. And Canada is currently in the middle of a very big reckoning over the actions of these state-funded and church-run boarding schools.
They were called residential schools, and they were part of a government policy to attempt to assimilate Indigenous children and destroy, basically, Indigenous cultures and languages. According to the BBC, the policy traumatised generations of Indigenous children who were forced to abandon their native languages, speak English or French, and convert to Christianity.
Yeah, some 150,000 First Nations, Métis and Inuit children were taken from their families during this period. They were put into these boarding schools and many of them didn't return. They went missing. And the reckoning over this has really been accelerated by the relatively recent discovery of the unmarked graves of Indigenous children. And I think at the moment, the current count is 1,100 bodies of children that have been found so far at multiple different sites. And that's led to further investigation of the practices at these residential schools.
God, yeah.
Yeah, it's really horrific. I can't imagine. There's be so many families as well that are very directly dealing with this kind of trauma right now.
Yeah, so it makes sense then that there would be calls, as there have been for the Queen specifically, to apologise for the role of the Crown and the Anglican Church, because she's head of the church, in the horrific treatment of the Indigenous people in Canada. But this tour saw Charles being directly confronted with that request.
Yeah, Roseanne Archibald, who's the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations, appealed directly to Charles for an apology on behalf of the Queen during a reception in Ottawa. And there were other Indigenous leaders there, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was there, other people were there. And she said, "I asked for an apology from His Mother the Queen, the head of the Anglican Church, for whatever happened in the institutions of assimilation and genocide. I also asked for an apology for the failures of the Crown in that relationship that we have with them, in our treaty relationship with them." I think we should say at this point that Justin Trudeau has not asked for an apology from the Queen.
Yeah.
Despite him, being at the same event, talking to a lot of the Indigenous people leaders as well, he doesn't have a similar call.
I do think it's striking, though, that it seems like so many of the people that they're meeting when they go to these Commonwealth realms are feeling emboldened to speak directly about these things in a way that maybe they wouldn't have beforehand, even though, as we just said, the Queen is both head of state and head of the Church of England, so it makes total sense that people would ask for her to apologise, because, as I'm sure many of you know, the Pope apologised for the abuse suffered by Indigenous people at the hands of the Catholic Church, who ran up to 70% of the schools, and the Pope apparently plans to visit in person to apologise again.
Yeah, the United Anglican and Presbyterian churches have issued formal apologies back in the 1980s and 1990s, but I'm guessing that the discovery of these unmarked graves has shed new light on the extent of the actions committed by these schools, and I think that's why you're getting this renewed call for apologies. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, he's also apologised recently for the Anglican Church's involvement, but he's not actually the top dog in the Church of England, so the Queen is being quite slippery here, I think. She is at the top of both of these institutions that are responsible for these atrocities, but, it seems to have been passed off on the lower downs to actually take responsibility.
Yeah, but now you have these people who feel able to speak out about these things, so she doesn't get away with it in the same way.
Yeah.
You'd hope.
Well, yeah, exactly. You'd hope. Charles's response was very typical royal, I thought. He, acknowledged the issue, saying, "I know that our visit here this week comes at an important moment, with Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples across Canada committing to reflect honestly and openly on the past, and to forge a new relationship for the future." But, the crux of his statement was that he and Camilla look forward to listening to you and learning about the future you are working to build. So it's classic royal nonsense where they kind of distance themselves from their involvement in what's happened, or the role they could play in, trying to make it better for people by apologising or taking some kind of active role in making things better than they are. And I guess, deflecting with platitudes is classic royal.
Yeah, I do wonder if Charles does become king, will he be more willing to offer these kind of apologies? He doesn't seem as restrained in the same way as the Queen does when it comes to these kind of issues.
Yeah, and I suppose, like you're saying, it remains to be seen whether he sees that as a benefit of his role, not as head of state, that he's able to speak more freely, or if it's a personal thing that he's going to bring to the role when he ascends, or whatever it's called. Anyway, Roseanne Archibald has said that this acknowledgement alone was not enough, but it was a first step, and that when an apology happened, it would represent one step on the road to healing for First Nations. It certainly seems that these Royal Commonwealth tours are increasingly just opportunities to raise global awareness of the crimes and horrific actions perpetrated by the UK and the Crown specifically around the world.
Yeah, and I think particularly, I'm sure a lot of you will remember when Prince William and Kate Middleton went to Canada and how different that tour was. Obviously, Kate in particular and Will are much more popular than Charles and Camilla everywhere on earth. But the fact that the reception this time was so different, I think, is notable. The Times had a piece last weekend about how Commonwealth realms are or are not celebrating the Jubilee, and in the piece, it mentioned that Canada is virtually alone in its excitement for this. And it compared Canada to Antigua, Belize, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. But the Times said, this enthusiasm sets Canada apart among the Commonwealth realms of the Americas. Nearly everywhere else, feeling for the Crown are lukewarm, if they exist at all.
Yeah, and Peter Espew, Dean of Studies at Seminary College in Kingston and a long-time columnist for the Jamaican newspaper The Gleaner, he said, "For Victoria's Golden Jubilee and for her 60th, there was a lot of fanfare. This time, however, there's nothing in the way of events. Nothing from the Governor-General, who is the Queen's representative."
Yeah.
You've got one job, man. Come on.
They also had a quote from Philip Murphy, the Director of History and Policy at the Institute of Historical Research in London, and he was saying that attitudes to the monarchy in the Caribbean had changed considerably since the last Jubilee in 2012, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. And he said, as late as 2018, the joke was that the Caribbean leaders came up with a lot of talk about moving to a republic, but never do anything about it. But since Barbados became a republic, it has given a huge momentum to the Republican movement across the region.
Which is fantastic news.
Just great news.
Really good. I mean, this whole celebration, I think, seems very pointless for a lot of people. And there's such a huge amount of money being chucked at it, certainly in this country, that I think, if you are on the fence about the royals even, you could be tempted to fall on the anti-monarchist side, which I'm delighted about.
I think you're being a little bit too optimistic there, Tom.
Yeah.
I've been surprised the area that we live in London has a lot of posters up for Jubilee street parties.
True.
Our apartment building is having a Jubilee party.
Yeah.
I would have never thought this area that we live in would be the kind of place where people would recognise the Queen in that way. I do think there will be a lot of street parties and celebrations in England. I'm not so sure about the rest of the UK, but I do think there is going to be a big difference in how it is recognised outside of the UK in other Commonwealth realms.
Yeah.
If at all, this Times piece is saying.
But it's not just the Canada tour that has fallen on Charles's shoulders recently. He also had a very big gig because the Queen missed the opening of Parliament for the first time since 1963, which she missed because she was pregnant, right?
Yeah, she's only missed it 3 times. The other 2 times were when she was pregnant with Prince Andrew and Prince Edward.
Yeah, so she wasn't able to go to this one. So they did the obvious thing. They sent her hat, the crown, in its very own car to Parliament. And then Charles was following, and he read out her speech while the hat sat on its own cushion, and he sort of gazed longingly at it.
Those pictures are very funny.
Yeah.
And Will was there as well, walking behind Rose Hanbury's husband, who, as we've spoken about before, has a big role to play in the opening of Parliament. But the Queen's speech itself, read by Charles, laid out the government's plans on issues like the cost of living crisis. Just to give you guys some context, it's widely seen as doing nothing for the people most affected by this crisis, rising cost of energy and food, and to have that delivered by the child of an elected head of state sitting on a golden chair in a golden room.
Oh my God.
Pretty rich.
Yeah, it was a utterly ridiculous display of just being so out of touch with what was going on in the country, and it was mortifying.
I know, and to have the front page of The Sun the next day with the picture of Charles's adoring look at the crown with the headline, "I hope I did you proud, mummy."
I mean, cringe to the cringe.
That is cringe to the cringe for the UK, I would say.
Yeah. But we should note that although the Queen missed this work event, she was able to go to a horse show a couple of days later.
I feel awkward about criticising this. She is 96. She has to take things a day as they come.
But I still think, you should recognise the ridiculousness of this situation. You shouldn't have a head of state who can't fulfil her main duties. And this would be totally avoidable if we had an elected head of state. This isn't a criticism of the Queen for being the age she is and having to make these kind of decisions. This is a criticism of, the machine.
System.
Yeah, exactly. But the Telegraph's Camilla Tominey argued that the Queen has earned the right to pick and choose whichever engagements she attends from now on.
Spoken like a true monarchist.
Yeah, that's fucking bullshit. Do I get to just choose what work events I do and don't? Actually, I'd rather go to a concert than a meeting.
Well, you are just Tom.
I haven't earned that yet.
She's the Queen. I read this very interesting piece in the Daily Beast about whether the Queen will abdicate after the jubbly. This is obviously a question that people have been asking for 10 years, longer than 10 years. But this piece was prompted by Charles's appearance at Westminster in the Queen's stead. And Tom Sykes, the reporter, said that the Queen is scheduled to attend a Thanksgiving service at St. Paul's Cathedral on Friday, the 3rd of June, which Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are also expected to attend. But the Daily Beast says that the idea of the Queen sitting through this lengthy church service feels like a fantasy after the no-show at the opening of Parliament.
Even Buckingham Palace is now conceding in briefings that the Queen might not manage to make a live appearance at the Platinum Jubilee, and that, it's basically going to be up to how she feels on the day. What does that say about her function as head of state? Because
Daily Beast was saying, at best, it's thought that the Queen might make one balcony appearance for Trooping the Colour. That's on Thursday, the 2nd of June. That's her official birthday. And perhaps one more surprise appearance on the closing Sunday, the following Sunday evening of that jubbly weekend. But separately, I saw in the Mail on Sunday, a palace source said that even the Queen's presence on the balcony is by no means guaranteed, which I thought was shocking. Not because I think it's an outrage if she doesn't go. I just don't see the point in having it if she's not there.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I can imagine that Buckingham Palace is probably not the most accessible place if you're a wheelchair user or have any kind of mobility issues. And I can completely understand all that. But I just cannot fathom why you would do this jubbly balcony display if it's just Charles, Camilla, Will, Kate and their kids.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense, and it seems odd that they wouldn't find some way to do something in Windsor instead.
Yeah.
There's plenty of room for them to have soldiers walking past and things like that in Windsor.
Unless we are heading towards a regency, in which case this is the first of many times we will see Charles, Camilla, Will, Kate and their kids and no Queen on the balcony.
Yeah, it's true. But the Daily Beast also had reports of rumours that the Queen has problems with her heart, and that the reason she had to go to hospital for tests last year was because she had to have an MRI scan. And those kind of whole body scans are one of the few procedures that can't be done in a home hospital of the kind that has been set up in Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle for looking after the Queen. But an MRI doesn't just obviously do tests for your heart. It also does a whole range of health problems, including back issues, which would fit with this kind of mobility issues narrative that the palace has mentioned.
Yeah, like I think some people think there's some kind of conspiracy that the Queen is actually much sicker than she lets on. I think it's possible that it is mobility issues.
Yeah.
It's also possible that it's something else. But I think whatever it is, it's not going to get any better. Exactly. And I think they need to start making plans for what to do as her health grows more and more frail.
Yeah, like Clive Irving, who's the founding editor of the Sunday Times' Insight investigative journalism team, and he's also the author of The Last Queen. He told the Daily Beast she does not have to die in the saddle like Victoria after a rapid decline. There is nothing in the protocols to say that, so the sane thing would be to have her abdicate. The use of the Regency Act is the first step towards abdication, which I suspect will happen once the Jubilee is over.
The Daily Beast also previously reported that the Queen is using a wheelchair at home, something that the palace has not been willing to confirm. And there is a sense, according to the Daily Beast, that the Queen does not want to become a wheelchair monarch.
Right.
Which I just find all this conversation around the Queen's mobility issues so ableist and so difficult. Like, I remember last month there were pictures of her meeting someone in Windsor Castle and everyone was praising her for not using a walking stick.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not something to praise. Of course, it's her decision how she wants to be seen and whether to use these mobility aids in public. I'm not saying she has to come out and show us her wheelchair or whatever, but I just find that the public's reaction to it is absolutely not helpful.
No, not at all. It seems like, you know, the Queen's not going to see your comments on whether or not she uses a walking stick, but, like, your friends will, you know, friends with
your
mobility.
96-year-old friends on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what I mean? Like, she is 96 and I feel like British people just love projecting this image of like strength on the Queen, and you know, because she represents England or she represents the UK, and the UK is strong and resilient and doesn't need any mobility aids.
I mean, it's so like literally Victorian, this idea of like muscular Christianity where having a like physically perfect or exemplary body is a sign of moral strength and character and stuff, and it's like that just feels so totally out of date these days and so harmful to so many people. And it really does like make me kind of hold my head in my hands seeing it perpetuated again and again in papers and in the public. And I think in the palaces, the way the palace talks about it as well, to be honest.
But the Daily Beast was saying that the fact the Queen doesn't want to be seen using a wheelchair might increase the pressure on her to step down.
Yeah.
Wild.
I know, to be so dedicated to this like idea that she's basically putting her job on the line.
And quite sad.
Yeah, it is sad, and I think it would be easier for everyone if we just moved to an elected head of state, to be honest.
I think I agree. Duncan Larcombe, the former royal editor at The Sun, told the Daily Beast that the state opening of Parliament changed everything. The Queen really has no option if she's continually unable to perform her role as head of state. It's one thing not being able to go to an engagement in Glasgow for a climate summit, but if she's now apparently incapable of doing standard core jobs as head of state, then I think they will have to remove her, by consent, of course.
It's so funny to add that thing at the end, like, oh, by consent, as though they're going to, like, drive her out. But, I mean, it's a very, very good point, a very logical, very sane point that people are making. And I just wonder, you know, I don't think the palace operates on this kind of logic.
Yeah, and I feel like the people defending it, like the Camilla Tominey piece about social media saddos criticising the Queen, people trying to make it out like it's just ageism or something. And that's not it at all. She performs important functions as head of state.
Yeah, that's why she gets all that fucking money.
But she did step out for a surprise visit to the opening of the new Elizabeth line.
Yeah, this was a very special day for little baby, because Prince Edward was meant to do this on his own, and then at the last minute she decided to go along because, I don't know, she didn't trust him to do it.
Well, no, that's how they explained that they would be doing everything going forward for the Queen.
Right, yeah.
That she would always have one of the... what were they called? The, like, Magnificent Seven? Or
Yeah.
That they would always have one of the other senior royals assigned to do an engagement, and then if the Queen felt up to it, she'd go along with them.
Right, okay. So now we're getting to see that in practice.
But as we know from Tina Brown, the Queen loves infrastructure.
Just try to keep her away from the opening of a new tube line. But she was...
Tom, it's not a tube line.
Oh, yeah.
This has been the biggest bugbear in recent memory for me. I have been dragging my teeth through glass reading and talking about this fucking Elizabeth line, which we have to call the Elizabeth line, which every fucking underground map calls Elizabeth line, when the rest of them are called Central, Circle, Bakerloo, Victoria, not the fucking Victoria line, because those are all underground tube lines and this is Crossrail. But the Prime Minister felt, oh, we need more pomp and ceremony and pageantry around this, so we're going to call it the Elizabeth line, even though it's not a fucking line, it's a train. So now I think Boris Johnson needs to receive an additional fine for his crimes against the TfL style guide.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to, really, is it's the style guide being fobbed off here. But what I liked about this event was it brought me back to one of our very first Airheads episodes, because the Queen was taught how to use an Oyster card, and long-time listeners might remember that it was one of our first episodes when she learned how to use a self-service checkout in Sainsbury's.
Oh, it's so funny. Nobody even uses Oyster cards anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone just does contactless. But anyway.
I think maybe she was right not to trust Edward to do this on his own, because there was a really awkward video where Edward was telling the black TfL employee, who's like in the middle of showing the Queen how to top up her Oyster card, very important business. Edward says to him, can you just step back a sec? No. And then sort of shooed him off with his hand for getting too close to the Queen when he was just pointing at the Oyster card touch screen.
Yeah, you'd swear he had his hands on her.
Yeah. I mean, the royals just never learn, and it seems to me increasingly now that they just don't have the capacity to learn or understand
or
what
desire.
It looks like. Yeah, that too.
I did want to talk about Prince Harry and Meghan for a minute, because this week we heard via Page 6, not always the most reliable source, but we know that Harry and Meghan are always quick to deny untrue reports, and haven't heard any denials of this one yet. But Page 6 reports that Harry and Meghan are filming an At Home with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex style docuseries for Netflix.
Apparently the cameras have been allowed behind the scenes in their home in Montecito, and also accompanied them on their trip to New York last September.
And Page 6 says that apparently Netflix wants this series to come out this year to tie in with the release of Harry's memoirs, which I think are expected in September. But it hasn't been decided yet, because Harry and Meghan allegedly want the show to be held until next year and to space out a bit more.
Which I think, like, from a brand point of view for them makes a lot of sense. Like, I could see why they want to stagger these, like, big newsworthy projects to keep interest up over a longer period of time. Otherwise, you'd risk the book and the show being basically seen as the same kind of project and it all kind of being lumped together as one. But I am interested to see who's going to win this scheduling battle, because it seems like Netflix really need money sooner rather than later with all of the recent news about layoffs and stuff.
Yeah, and I have to say, this does sound a lot more exciting to me than the other projects that they have been working on.
Big time. We're big fans of the Kardashians, so I think this like really appeals to us. And like, there's already all these rumblings, as you'd expect, of they're going to cause even more stress for the Queen and tarnish the royals' name, as though you can like further tarnish the reputation of a family directly involved in the slave trade. But like, yeah, anyone could have seen that coming. But this is exactly the kind of content that had Netflix offering them up the big bucks on that deal in the first place.
I know, and the people who say, oh no, well, everybody would have loved to watch Pearl or the documentary about the Invictus Games or whatever. I'm sure there are many people who would love to watch them, but nowhere near as close to as many people that want to watch a documentary about Harry and Meghan themselves.
Yeah.
And if they're smart, which I think and hope they are, they will do it in a way that spotlights their work while also giving insight into them and their lives and how they do that work.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think people might even be annoyed at me for bringing up the Kardashians here, but like, the Kardashians are the blueprint for producing a docuseries about yourself. They've done it so successfully, and they managed to get that balance right between giving the audience the entertainment that they want without showing anything that they don't want you to see. So I feel like the Sussexes will probably err on the side of caution and be a little towards the kind of like drier, worthy side of things. But then I sort of made that prediction about the Oprah interview as well. So my predictions are really bad. So maybe we'll get a lot of very interesting, exciting stuff in this.
But I was thinking about, do you remember that bit in Tina Brown's book where she was saying that the last time she met Diana had spoke about how her plans for the future and how she wanted to have this sort of strategy of doing a project and making a documentary about that project. And that they would tie in that way. So it would be like documentaries about Diana doing whatever.
Yeah.
And how she was like, this would be a sensible strategy for Harry and Meghan to follow.
Yeah.
And now I wonder if perhaps
that is
the strategy.
The other Sussex news, though, dominating the headlines this week is speculation about their big jubbly return. So what are they going to be doing here? How much will we see them? Like all of that kind of thing.
I'm particularly interested in why Harry and Meghan aren't appearing on the balcony and whose call was it, because we've been hearing conflicting reports that Harry didn't want to, the Queen didn't want them to. Who was it? The line from royal reporters is that the Queen banned Harry and Meghan from the balcony. I saw the former BBC royal editor Peter Hunt wrote a piece for The Spectator in which he described this balcony ban as heartless and a mistake.
Yeah, he said, the Queen will have signed off on the decision. Charles and William will have shaped it. They've let personal animus and hurt get in the way. Harry and Meghan could have appeared on the balcony. It wouldn't have collapsed. Their removal from the lineup means they will become a distraction during the Jubilee weekend.
Also, just one other small detail I thought was interesting was he mentioned that at the 2012 Jubilee, the slimmed down balcony that they had at that point, where like Andrew and Edward, they were all excised, and he said that Andrew and Sophie were apparently particularly hurt about it. I hadn't thought he said Anne was like totally unbothered, but I hadn't thought of Sophie as being annoyed about it. Anyway, the Sussex's biographer Omid Scobie said, I'm told by a source that the Duke of Sussex had actually expressed some time ago that he and Meghan were very keen to be a part of the Jubilee engagements, including the Thanksgiving service at St. Paul's Cathedral, but less so for the formal balcony moment, which was felt on both sides to be more appropriate for their lives prior to stepping back.
It's very interesting. Like, I do wonder whether it would be more distracting for them to be there or for them not to be there. I feel like you're maybe damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, I'm like, oh, well, if they could, you know, like Peter Hunt is saying, if they could go and be on the balcony and there's nice pictures of them all together, then I think everybody would enjoy that. At the same time, I had seen Tina Brown, I think, saying that then everybody would just be looking at, oh, well, what's Will's expression like? Are they standing near each other? Are they on opposite sides of the balcony?
Yeah.
You know, do they look at each other at all? How close? Like, you know, all that stuff would be forensically analysed. And I just can't tell which would be better. I think I would prefer if they were on the balcony, but I can understand why they wouldn't want to.
I mean, I think that the best possible look for the Queen out of this would be if they had a successful balcony photo of them all together.
Yeah.
One where they managed to at least act for like 15 minutes like they got on with each other. Because then you could have a narrative of the Queen bringing the family back together.
Yeah.
And also the family coming together for the Queen. And I think there's a lot of ways that the palace could spin that and the press would, you know, probably get on board and stuff. But what we've got now with all the uncertainty and the back and forth and the conflicting narratives, it's just more of this messiness that undermines basically the last years of the Queen's reign. Well, it's one of many things that undermines the last years of the Queen's reign, but you know what I mean.
Speaking of Will.
Boo!
At the FA Cup final between Chelsea and Liverpool last week, Will, who is president of the Football Association, was there to present the cup to the winning team, which was Liverpool.
You were so pleased they won, weren't you?
You will never walk alone, is what Liverpool fans say. The crowd, apparently led by Liverpool fans, booed Will and the national anthem before the match.
This was wild to me to see this. Like, the Daily Mail quoted Conor O'Neill, who's a football writer for the Liverpool Echo, who said Liverpool fans are well known for booing God Save the Queen at Wembley, and claimed that the reasons date from the city's antipathy towards Margaret Thatcher's Tory government in the 1980s. The Conservative government's managed decline of the city, he said, was then followed by the failings of the government following the Hillsborough disaster, which further entrenched those feelings.
The Hillsborough disaster was when 96 Liverpool fans were crushed to death at an FA semi-final at Hillsborough Stadium in Sheffield in 1989. And there was a big cover-up of the police's involvement, their mismanagement of the crowds. This went on for decades until last year, basically, when 600 survivors and victims' family members were finally compensated for this false police campaign that blamed the fans for the crush.
Yeah. And, this booing was on the front pages everywhere, like across the board pretty much. And a whole load of politicians, including Boris Johnson, came out to criticise the fans for booing Will, with some commentators saying it was disrespecting the Queen in her big jubbly year. Others said it wasn't anything to do with the Queen or the monarchy, but it's all to do with the Tory government.
Yeah, because apparently it was loudest during the national anthem.
Right.
But the Liverpool manager and dreamboat, Jurgen Klopp, defended the fans. He said, "I know our people well enough that they would not do it if there was no reason."
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I was surprised to see a columnist in the Daily Express, Robert Taylor, describing the fans as illustrating in an admittedly crude fashion that the cap-doffing age of deference is well and truly over. Aren't they merely exhibiting the truth that the royals have long since been seen by many of us as take them or leave them, out of touch, wealthy celebrities rather than untouchable pillars of the establishment?
A question worth asking, I think. And I think everyone who is saying booing the national anthem is a political statement that doesn't belong in the world of sport. So is singing the national anthem then. Expressing support for the monarchy or for the government is as political as opposing it. So once again, it's a case of people deciding what side of the line they think is acceptable or not.
Will did have a better week this week though.
Yeah. We were so surprised to see them hang out with Tom Cruise so much.
Yeah, I'm very jealous. They got to see Top Gun Maverick before we do.
Yeah.
I actually was flabbergasted when I found out that Tom Cruise was going to be one of the hosts for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration called A Gallop Through History.
Along with his longtime friend Alan Titchmarsh, who is not a friend of Tom Cruise, but a celebrity gardener.
His peer in the UK.
Yeah, he is the UK's Tom Cruise. But this was such a weird celebrity guest to have at this event, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I think we talked about it when it was announced, but now that we've watched it, or sort of skimmed through it and watched the Tom Cruise, and Tom made us watch the Alan Titchmarsh bits as well. But this was filmed at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, and we watched the interview he did beforehand. And also I saw that actually Tom Cruise was asked, reportedly, to be part of the event. He didn't pitch himself or anything.
Right.
So very interesting that they thought of him. I wonder who asked him.
Yeah.
But supposedly he jumped at the chance. And in this interview beforehand, it was just so embarrassing watching him gushing over the Queen, so earnestly.
Yeah. So he said, "She's just a woman that I greatly admire. I think she's someone who has tremendous dignity and I admire her devotion. What she's accomplished has been historic. She has met presidents, world leaders, people from all walks of life. The world knows the dignity, devotion, and kindness. That is what I've always felt about her." This was so weird. One, yes, it's the gushing, but two, it's the fact that he kind of just kept having to scrabble for more things to say about the Queen.
Well, they kept asking him.
Yeah, when he was clearly just there to talk about Top Gun Maverick, and they were like, "Tell us how much you love the Queen." But also, does anyone associate the Queen with kindness? Even the people who are really pro the Queen, kindness, I don't think would be one of the words that comes top of mind. Devotion, sure. Dignity, I guess. But kindness?
I was trying to think of another American actor who could do this. I marvel at Tom Cruise. I think he's so professional. It's the last American movie star type thing.
Yeah.
And I was trying to imagine, just because I was thinking about the last sort of American celebrities that the royals have met, Will and Kate with Camila Cabello, for example. It's those kind of people that younger people like, but she's never going to say any of this kind of shit.
Yeah.
But he was able to keep spouting off this stuff about the Queen, and you believed him.
He's an actor.
He's an incredible actor.
The horse show itself, I mean, as you said, we fast forwarded through a lot of it, and thank God we were able to. The Guardian had a review of it by Stuart Heritage, and it's so funny. He described it as an unending equine onslaught. He said, your enjoyment of the night largely depended on how much you like watching lines of horses make geometric shapes. This was a very difficult routine, commentator Philip Schofield told us again and again as we were treated to the sight of several horses walking around a vast dirt area in a rectangle, or in a circle, or going quite fast, or going relatively slowly, or in one show-stopping moment, temporarily lying down before getting back up again.
This whole review is very funny.
It's so
if
good.
you guys haven't read it yet, it's definitely more enjoyable than the 2.5 hour thing. There was one moment you liked with Alan Titchmarsh, though. Did you want to?
Oh, yeah, where Alan Titchmarsh starts his kind of speech by saying that for 70 years there's been one heartbeat at the centre of the nation, and that heartbeat is the Queen's. And then it cuts to the Queen as she just pauses for a moment and then just shrugs like she doesn't give a shit. And it should be noted that she looked miserable throughout this whole thing, apart from when the horses were on, and then she was beaming. But literally any time there was some very grasping celebrity up to kind of gush over her, she looked like she would rather be anywhere else.
Tom, this is how the resting stone face works.
Oh, yes,
you're
resting
falling
stone face.
for the trap Tina Brown said, where you're saying she looked miserable. Maybe I'm saying she's having the time of her life. Neither of us really knows, because that's the magic of the resting stone face.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right.
But back to Tom Cruise. Last week, Kate and Will attended a royal film performance of Top Gun Maverick, the sequel to Top Gun. And this performance was held in aid of the film and TV charity, which supports people working behind the scenes in the UK's screen sector. It is a tradition dating back to 1946, and the most recent one before this was for the Sam Mendes film 1917, which Charles and Camilla attended back in 2019.
Which made quite a lot of sense, because it's sort of war film, and British people love war films so much.
Yeah.
But this film seemed like a much weirder choice. But it was reported back in April that Tom Cruise had hosted a special IMAX screening of the film for Will, Kate, Beatrice, Eugenie, Sophie, and some of the other royals near Leicester Square. So they'd even seen the film already, so it must be good.
I mean, of course, Will is president of BAFTA, so I don't think he really needs an excuse to go to film premieres. I actually can't understand why he doesn't go to more. If that was me, I'd be there every week. It's just the fact that they never do makes the ones that they choose to go to all the more striking.
Yeah.
And I think unlike the James Bond film, or when they go to like a David Attenborough documentary premiere, this is such a strange film to give a royal endorsement to. Like, it is the face of American military propaganda.
Yeah.
Basically.
But, I mean, evidently Will is a massive fan.
Massive.
Because I don't know if you guys saw his fucking shoes.
How could you miss them?
He wore a tuxedo and he paired it with Crockett and Jones loafers with F-18 jets on them. And this is a nod to the fighter jet that Tom Cruise's character Maverick flies in the film. And
so funny.
it was so embarrassing for this grown man to wear his airplane shoes to meet Tom Cruise.
It reminded me of when the former Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar used to wear novelty socks everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And how that was like, you know, a kind of endearing move on his part, which never endeared me. But I felt like this was even less endearing, because these slippers, I looked them up, and I mean, these are obviously custom ones, but the other embroidered ones cost at least £300.
Oh my God. Oh, it's so embarrassing.
I was really amused. On the red carpet, Tom Cruise said he and Will have a lot in common. We both love England, and we're both aviators. We both love flying.
We both love England.
So much to talk about, England and flying.
Kate looked great. She wore impeccably fitted off-the-shoulder Roland Mouret gown in black and white with these really, really nice diamond star earrings.
Yeah, I thought she looked fantastic.
Yeah.
The fit on that dress was beautiful. Like you say, impeccable.
And, like, very different from the sort of mega glam Bond look that we had, which was all gold. And
This was so, like, modern, so sleek.
Yeah.
Reminiscent of much more conventional Hollywood looks, I would say. Like, immediately brought to mind Julia Roberts' Oscar dress.
Yeah.
I saw lots of people comparing it to Reese Witherspoon wore a similar one to the Oscars in 2011, I think. So I thought that was like an interesting move that, you know, for the Bond movie is when she pulls out all the stops. But then to do something like this, I thought was very appropriate. And at the same time, one of her best looks ever.
Yeah, it was a great look. But, like, you know, like you're saying, this is like conventional red carpet premiere look. It's kind of almost honing something that might become a lot more usual for something that they're going to do, or the kind of like level of engagements they might be doing more of.
Well, I thought it was, you know, remarkable that she blended in so much in the black and white compared to at Bond. You know, she was this big, shining, glowing golden orb in the middle of it that you could see her from a mile away.
Yeah.
So I guess choosing when to stand out and when to blend in. But, you know, as well as the fantastic earrings and the great dress, she had a very handy Alexander McQueen clutch, 2,300 pound clutch, which she quickly deployed after Tom Cruise reached for her hand to help her up the stairs at one point. This was kind of the big picture moment from the night anyway. What did you think of this moment?
It immediately, to me, was like, okay, this is a moment that people are going to feel very strongly about. Because we've seen people losing their shit anytime people touch royals. And
like
then
Michelle Obama touching the Queen.
Exactly. And then to have the Tom Cruise of it all as well, where I think a lot of people find him quite sinister. And, you know...
He is divisive.
He's very divisive. And I was thinking, like, you know, would I spend £2,300 not to hold Tom Cruise's hand? Quite possibly. What about you?
I saw some people saying that, oh, this was Tom Cruise trying to insert himself, getting himself a picture that would bring him loads of headlines, which it did. But at the same time, I also know what it's like when you're trying to go upstairs in very high shoes and quite a tight dress, and that, you know, I would be terrified to fucking fall on my face in front of a million cameras. So I would probably appreciate if somebody extended their hand to me, and if my own husband wasn't going to do it, then who better than Tom Cruise? I saw Lainey Gossip had an interesting piece about all this, and she pointed out that Tom Cruise was like Will and Kate's host for the event, which is kind of unusual for this type of premiere. Like, she pointed out that at a Bond premiere, Daniel Craig wouldn't be the one ushering Will and Kate down the line of actors for their handshakes. He'd be part of that line, waiting to shake Will and Kate's hand and speak to them for 30 seconds before they moved on to the next actor in the queue.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, there was no royal press officer next to the Cambridges. Tom Cruise was doing that work for them. The press officers were hanging back, no worries, because Tom was handling it, which obviously would have been negotiated beforehand with Tom's team and the royal communications team. But to have that trust in Tom Cruise is really something.
No, I know, and I think it's very interesting the bit she has in that piece where she says, it was almost as though it was his house. The king of movies was receiving the Prince and Princess of England, and he personally welcomed them to his home, the castle of cinema. You don't see this often or ever. And the flex here is that even though he was attending to Will and Kate and guiding them up and down the carpet to meet the cast, and then inside theatre for another receiving line of producers, in that position, he became their equal.
He did, Tom.
And, you know, in a lot of ways, he is, because they're both representatives of these shadowy, very powerful institutions.
But he doesn't broadcast the Scientology aspect of it as much as they do with the royals. But I guess the institution of Hollywood is also one that he is at the front of. I was surprised to see the Cambridges even tagged at Tom Cruise in their Instagram post afterwards. Something they certainly didn't do with at official Mel B when Will presented her with an MBE a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so you can tell when he's really starstruck.
Because they posted like a carousel, and the second picture in the carousel was of Will and Tom Cruise together. Yeah. Well, let's get on to this. Why do we think the royals are cozying up to Tom Cruise? Because he's not like a new fan of the royals. He was friendly with Diana. He met her at the premiere of Far Away with Nicole Kidman, 1992. He met her a few times before her death. He then attended her funeral. He spoke out against paparazzi after her death on CNN. But why is he featuring so prominently here in the Jubbly year?
it is really perplexing, and we asked some of you guys on Instagram, and your theories were pretty far-ranging, but they include, does Scientology have its grasp on the royals? I mean, I think that they're probably in the process of negotiating some kind of alliance.
Shut up.
No, I don't really. But also, you were wondering, do they think he's American royalty? And I think that is, like, holds some water for me, because American Hollywood
I think he's
celebrity.
American royalty.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I think you're right, because I think that Hollywood celebrity is American royalty. It's the nearest parallel, I think. Some of you are wondering whether Tom Cruise can make the royals seem relevant. I don't think so, because I don't think Tom Cruise is, like, super relevant. Like, he's an incredibly polished and professional, height of glamour representative of Hollywood celebrity, yes. But I always think of being relevant as being, like, known by young people. And I don't think the young people are obsessed with Tom Cruise anymore. Sorry.
And then some other people were asking if they were trying to one-up Harry and Meghan and their famous friends. I mean, I'm not really convinced by any of these theories. I'm not sure what I think. Like, is it possible Will is just a huge Tom Cruise fan? Like, he reportedly grew up watching Top Gun, and there was some kind of suggestion that maybe that was what motivated him to become a pilot.
Yeah.
I saw Darren McGrady, who was formerly a chef at Buckingham Palace for 10 years, said on Twitter that he remembered Princess Diana taking Will and Harry to visit Tom Cruise on the set of Mission Impossible, some of which was filmed in the UK in 1995 or 1996.
Yeah.
So it's possible that, you know, Tom Cruise is just his hero. Like, maybe he's sort of like, you know, like me and loves Mission Impossible and sort of just tries not to think about the Scientology stuff when watching his movies.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that makes the most sense to me. Much as I absolutely love all the conspiracy theories, and I do think that having the British monarchy meeting representative Scientology and Hollywood is, like, so rife for, like, very fertile ground for conspiracy theories, and I love to imagine those. This one makes the most sense, that Will is a massive fan.
But what do you think is next for Tom Cruise and the royals? Like, can they put him in charge of the Jubbly fly past? I want to see him scale the palace. Like, that'd be even better than Brian May playing on the roof.
Yeah,
at the
because
last
they're going to have
Jubbly.
to top that somehow. And I guess there is now still time for him to liven up these potentially dire Jubbly celebrations.
Oh my god, the lineup for the concert.
Yeah.
Very unimpressed. But we will be back to talk about the Jubbly. We're just trying to figure out when's the best time to do it, because we figure we'll wait until it's all done, adjusted, and then we can talk about the whole thing. So we'll see how it's going. We might try and do one for the 6th of June, or it might be the following weekend.
Yeah, we'll obviously let all you guys know on Instagram. But whenever our next episode is, we hope you guys enjoy the Big Jubbly countdown.
And thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
You can be my wingman anytime.
Bullshit. You can be mine.